I'm gonna level with you all here. I've never been a fan of the Expendables movies. The first outing, directed by Stallone himself, was a ghastly attempt of bringing back action movie legends and paying homage to the machismo-driven, testosterone-fueled kick-assery of the 80s action movies, but the aftermath was nothing more than a hodgepodge of terrible acting, wretched dialogue, unfunny one-liners hearkening to their previous work, and nauseating action set pieces layered with CGI blood and gore that makes projects from the Asylum look like awards contenders. The second one, while marginally improved from its predecessor, cannot overcome the same repetitive and tired problems as set by the original film. But hey, at least the cinematography is shot better in the action scenes, so there's that, I guess. And before you think it could get any better, it didn't in Expendables 3. And hey, as much as I admire the cheesy 80s action films like Commando, Invasion USA, and Cobra, the Expendables series fails to tribute to those over-the-top action films from long ago and embrace why they were so ironically loved in the first place. They were ridiculous action movies and jokes of themselves that inhabited the America F yeah aesthetic during the Cold War, or typical one-man army movies carried by actors who used their charisma and presence to make the realistic or cartoonish action so nostalgic and awesome. For example, Ilya Naschler's work like Hardcore Henry and Nobody paid tribute to those movies while fundamentally being brilliant on their own. And it's absurd that a franchise that stars some of the biggest action titans of the last 30 years couldn't even do it right. So, once we thought that Expendables 3 was going to be the nail in the coffin and the death of this franchise, it wasn't until, you guessed it, a fourth installment would be produced, aiming to return to the blood-soaked roots of being rated R while bringing new cast members. Minus Schwarzenegger, Jet Li, Bruce Willis. Especially one of the main leaders, Hail Caesar, played by Terry Crews, who exited the project after stating allegations of sexual harassment that happened to him, and was pressured by producer Avi Lerner that if he were to stay, he would have to drop the case. Despite the controversies, casting changes, and delays, the fourth installment of The Expendables has finally been released. And for the life of me, I can't even fathom how Lionsgate even distributed this turd in the first place, but here we are. Expendables 4, or Expend4BLES as we're gonna call it from now on, is one of the worst movies of the year and is the worst film in the franchise, bar none. Then again, what did I expect from the director of Need for Speed? In Expendables 4, our gaggle of militarized quintagenarian geezers we call action heroes are tasked by an agent played by Andy Garcia to stop a mercenary played by Iko Uwais from delivering nuclear warheads from a weapons plant in Libya to a US cruiser by orders of a leader codenamed Ocelot, with the apocalyptic objective of ramming the ship into the East Russian coastline, thus initiating World War III. After being kicked out of the group for saving a man's life, leaving a mission jeopardized, Jason Statham takes it upon himself to protect and reinforce the group in case of an ambush and to save the world from nuclear warfare. After doing thorough detective work on this movie, it's pretty evident front and center that the writing has gotten more derivative and less enthralling than the last, picking from every single cliched guys on a mission storyline from the past some odd years, thus leaving you with nonsensical story beats, predictable twists and turns, unbelievable plot holes, and ideas that have been regurgitated on screen ad nauseum without the slightest bit of coherency or intelligence to make the story even the slightest bit entertaining. So firstly, the movie doesn't care about its plot. But secondly, and funnily enough, the actors don't care about their roles. Stallone's Barley Ross is hardly in this movie, mainly because he wanted to pass the torch to Jason Statham once he departed from this franchise. And for the time he is on screen, his performance is just like he's just going through the motions, just waiting for the scene to end so we can just go off the set, smoke some cigars, and he can focus on something that he should actually be doing right now, like making a sequel to Tango and Cash. His material as well is also baffling, pointless, and downright monstrous, because once the film unveils why he's been absent for such a significant chunk of time, it plays itself like a dark moment of comedy that you would see in a Family Guy cutaway gag, but it actually makes him out to be a terrible human being. And for a guy who basically plays the same action type that he starred in every action movie, Jason Statham is still the reigning, defending Jason Statham acting champion at the Jason Statham Olympics. But I wouldn't lie by saying that he is perhaps the only individual in this movie who even tries to put in any level of charm in this piece of crap. But even then, it just isn't enough. Dolph Lundgren's comedic relief has gotten stale at this point, and Randy Couture has nothing to do aside from delivering exposition and exhausting running gags about his ear and him swooning over one of the female Expendables. And much like the old blood, the new blood in this movie is just as unfortunate. 50 Cent looks lost every scene he's in, and he hardly contributes to the plot. Jacob Scipio, who is playing the son of Antonio Banderas' character from Expendables 3, made my ears bleed with his comedic relief. And Megan Fox is a good actress in the same way that ear rape videos are a comfortable form of ASMR. I mean, in this year, it's bad enough that I have to hear her voice act in Mortal Kombat 1. In this movie, whether it's her wooden attempt of being seductive and acerbic that has worn off since the first two Michael Bay Transformers films, or her spouting out military orders with all the emotion of a cash register, she has the kind of acting in this movie, and I can't believe I'm saying this, that makes me want to apologize to Gal Gadot. You think I'm lying? As for the otherwise talented of the new blood, Iko Uwais was an expendable villain in the sense that any other performer could have played him, and exists only to have a one-on-one showdown with Jason Statham, that unironically exists just to solely remind you that you could easily be watching him fight the assassin in the Raid 2. And remember how I talked about the leader codenamed Ocelot in this movie? Once it is revealed who the big bad Ocelot is, not only is it as predictable as Tim Blake Nelson's twist villain in Angel Has Fallen, but when you wrap your brain around the plot, you begin to realize that everything about the plan and the strategy behind it doesn't make any sense. Like, if this guy was the mastermind who was calling the shots and pulling strings behind the scenes, why would he even display this plan to the Expendables or even tag along with them? Why couldn't he just create a diversion, creating fake locations to a US cruiser in one area while the actual plan is happening on a different cruiser? Heck, why didn't he just not do anything and let everything all happen to begin with? Not to mention, hasn't this guy realized that this is the same military ragtag group that has saved the world from terrorists and warlords through 3 movies? And finally, as much as he is a talented martial artist like Iko Uwais, Tony Jaa, aside from exchanging banter with Jason Statham, is ultimately wasted with subpar character work of a former Expendables member who does not have the desire to return to those ways. Only minutes later, with him being perfectly okay slaughtering mercenaries, making this whole entire arc a complete waste of time. He also gets paired up with Levi Tran in a martial arts fight scene with one of the main bad guys of the movie, but it comes off less of a bonus or a reward for an audience watching an electrifying movie that's all about shooting and explosions and blood, and more of a contrived scene just so they can cater and pay lip service to the fanboys of martial arts films. The thing that also flabbergasts me is that this movie costs $100 million according to Dolph Lundgren. How did the visual effects get approved at this state with this kind of budget? Like, how? When you arrive to the very first action scene of the entire movie, everything that is wrong with the visual effects is on full frontal display. From the obvious green screen compositing to the phony visual effects of military aircraft and vehicles landing on a runway, to small effects like fire in a crash site looks like someone's first time experience on Adobe After Effects. This also goes into the production design as well, such as the Libyan bases, which look like an obviously green screen layered studio backlot, and naval or private CIA bases that have all the aesthetic and atmosphere of a direct-to-DVD John Travolta movie. Even the movie's gigantic selling point, which is its blood-drenched, exaggerated rated R violence, are mostly comprised of CGI body parts getting blown off with all the realism of a Mortal Kombat fatality, a bad one, and the action itself is comprised of boring shootout after boring shootout, and because there's no suspense in this movie whatsoever, the heroes don't even suffer so much as a paper cut, because no matter what happens in this movie, nobody is going to die or get viciously injured. And whenever that does happen, when someone does get viciously injured, or even on the brink of getting killed, it is treated as no big deal whatsoever at the end, or an absurdly gigantic Deus Ex Machina comes in to save everybody's lives. A final point. The movie is also horrifically edited. There is a scene in the beginning of the movie in which Iko Uwais is threatening a Libyan soldier to get information, and once he has acquired that information, the scene in the middle of an action scene awkwardly fades to black, and then fades back again to Sylvester Stallone getting on top of a motorcycle, and then it transitions into the opening movie logo. I'm not joking, you guys. That actually happened. This movie with a $100 million budget has that kind of editing. Not to mention that at a point, it even tries to film the first act in a non-chronological order, and it is done horrifically, as the edits themselves don't make sense considering the time differences between one country and another, or we're supposed to believe that the Warheads heist is taking about as long as a flight from the US all the way to Libya. If you hate the concept of forced fourth installments to franchises that should have been left in the ditch forever and all time, then you're in luck to jot yet another film for the worst of the year list, because Expend4BLES is precisely what it is. A disingenuous, embarrassing waste of time, money, and effort that has no reason of existence aside from being a tax write-off for a bunch of newcomers and actors who aren't even in their glory days anymore. If audiences were to celebrate the firepower of the 80s action flick, pick any of the above that you can think of starring Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Norris, Lundgren, Van Damme, or whatever action star that you can think of. With Expend4BLES, don't even think about it. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.